So we want to blend part of the future of health and medicine with art, as Will Weissman started off our day, also with the art of music and the art of imagery. And that can be so powerful in education. Future of medical education, per se, is often driven by the convergence of technology. And the animation you just saw is from our next faculty member, David Bolinsky, who made that for Harvard Medical School a couple years ago. And it's going to share us a little bit more of a taste of the cutting edge of medical innovation and beyond. David.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, that piece was sort of subtitled, "Not Your Daddy's Krebs Cycle." When Dan first asked me to give a talk, you know how sometimes you don't quite hear right when somebody asks you to do something? I kind of thought he said excavation, not innovation. So, but it got me to thinking. 30,000 years ago, there were people who were very much like us, concerned with communication, concerned with explaining to younger folks what it was all about. And these are people who had an ardent observation of their world for a number of reasons. One, they would be dead if they didn't. Number two, they decided to be good ancestors, which is why we're here. And number three, they had an inherent curiosity about how to take what was in their head and put it into a permanent form. And so what they did was they invented visual communication. Now, inventing something is interesting, but when you have to invent the tools to do it and the medium that the tools use and things like color, contour, line, composition, and likeness, and do it in a cave that never seen sunlight, and is full of smoke from the fires that you light to see the walls. It's a very interesting thing, but think about it. These are people who are 30,000 years from what we consider modernity, agriculture, buildings, and the things like that. And look at the elk. Not very easy to see in the center of the picture. And if you were to count the legs on that elk, you would see that there are 8 legs. And so what these people are doing is they're not only drawing animals, they're drawing the place in the animal where it's running and the arrow needs to hit. So these are tutorials. These are excellent tutorials on how to survive to the next year. And if you look at the upper right corner, there's a rhinoceros. There's a lower corner rhinoceros, female, male's up on top, and the male is running, the male is charging. Do not stand in front of a male that looks like this. And what I posit here is that these are the very first animations, 30,000-year-old animations. These people understood what motion was about. They understood what depicting motion was about. And these are people who used carbon black, they used ochres, they used mineral clays to create an exponential increase in information transfer over scratched lines on rock. So they were in a position that we are. They were in a position of an explosion of information that not only gave a lot of information, but was highly aesthetic. It was absolutely gorgeous to look at, and it actually downloads today and tickles the same neurons in our brains as it did in them. That's brilliance. When I saw these things at 10 years old, I had already wanted to draw, and I already loved science, and I wanted to somehow emulate their ability to transcend the current way of doing things and communicate visually in science. So I got a degree in medical illustration. This is some of the work that I did when I was at Yale School of Medicine. But I was doing essentially 16th century drawings. I was using a steel quill pen dipped in a bottle of ink and scratched on a flat surface. And while it communicated, while it was some semblance of a visual vocabulary that I wanted to convey what I wanted to convey, it didn't move. It wasn't in color, and I had to wait from when I first decided I wanted to use computers to animate a very long time. I decided in 1968 that I wanted to use computers to do my drawings, and that was 4 years before Pong, so I had a ways to wait. But I finally did it, and one of the interesting things that you find in doing the innovative stuff that you do is there's always pushback. How many people here have proposed something to a dean and have been told, well, that's too avant-garde, that isn't going to work, that hasn't been done before? Well, the dean at Yale told me in a very sympathetic way, son, there's no room in medicine for cartoons. So I quit. I left my job as senior medical illustrator at Yale School of Medicine and started the first digital medical animation company in the world 31 years ago. I hadn't actually used a computer at the time. You know, you get up on a 30-foot diving board and you look down and you say, well, if I jump, how long is it going to take to fill the pool before I hit the bottom? So you do that. I think Craig Venter said that once, so I have to credit him. So I started to do these medical animations and doing things with these new tools. I was doing things in color really for the first time in my professional life. But doing things that are really cool and really beautiful and really colorful doesn't give the information that I wanted to give. What if you were to take that capillary and grow a branch off of it? That's a little more compelling. That's more like it. So you start there and you move on and you do other illustrations. You do hearts and you do blood and you do all sorts of things. And then you say, well, how can we make it dynamic? How can we make it more like newsreel footage where the cameraman is running along with the thing that's going on? And you make it so that it's not only scientifically accurate, but it's visually memorable and it contains a lot of information that's important for somebody to take away. Which is all well and good, but then there's that other part, the tactile part, the ability to be able to interact. And I've been wanting to do interactive visualization for a very long time because that's one of the best ways to learn. And so you go from building babies to building the Luke arm for DECA to looking at viruses to see how they can be re-engineered to be nanobots. And a lot of things that are very cool about how different systems work, different types of microplumbing and micro tools, and of course, kinesins. the little FedEx guys in every single one of our cells that pull along these great vesicles of cargo proteins that are either going to be put on the surface of the cell or carried from one part of the cell to the other. Very busy bodies, amazing little things. And then this is a piece from what you just saw. And this got picked up by the cosmetics industry. These are pieces that we did for Dove soap to show how the chemistry of Dove soap makes your skin smooth. And it's interesting that when you design a vocabulary, it sometimes crosses media. It sometimes crosses from one form of communication to another. So you can do something that's for medicine that gets seen in everyday life. And the thing about that that's very cool is that we've got to begin to educate our kids in science, get them interested in science, get them thrilled by science. And the gaming industry is an area where our kids spend a huge amount of energy and learn a huge amount of stuff that isn't going to necessarily translate into the job world. But if we can get into their heads with games, if we can get into their heads and use the same type of technology to get them interested in science as an elementary school student, think about an iPad app that would do something like this. An app like this you could create at so many different levels and so many different layers that students from elementary school through high school could go down as deep as they want on their own recognizance and only come up for air when they've satisfied their curiosity. And the whole point here is to stimulate their curiosity. I mean, there's a huge amount of information in the body. There's a huge amount of stuff that's sitting there waiting to get our kids excited, whether it's the heart, whether it's the lungs, whether it's the joints, whether it's the immune system, whether you're talking about things on the macro or micro scale. We are at the level now where we need to have our kids get interested in science so that they can begin to implement the stuff that you guys are doing. And we are at a point now where we are failing to interest kids in science to the extent that we might. And so I think it's imperative upon all of us to think about how we might just get the kids interested enough in science to say, hey, that's happening inside of me. That makes me interested in learning more. And once they learn more, once you give them the tools so that they can establish their own observation of these sorts of things, then we get into an environment where we can take that next step, where all of these exponential tools can be utilized by kids who will then understand that this thing over here relates to this thing over here in a way that reading about them would never have made the connection. And it's only by learning that things that are disparate are really connected and being able to ask questions and do explanations and do explorations on that we're really going to be able to get our next generation to be in the place where you are, and that's excited about this, that's making new things happen, and really finding out what our forebears found out in those caves about exploring the world and really showing what being human is. It's a very exciting time, and it's very cool to be part of it. And thank you, Daniel. Tomorrow, I'm going to show a little bit of a piece that we're working on right now. It's an interactive piece for medical students. And to show that there really is evolution, that's when I started. Thank you, folks.